Right now, before this video has had a chance to say anything, your body has already decided something. Not about the video, about you. There is a layer of you that runs underneath thought, underneath intention, underneath everything you have ever tried to believe about yourself. It isn't waiting for your permission. It has been running for years, quietly, like a note held so long you stopped hearing it as music and started hearing it as silence. Most people spend their lives trying to want the right things. They repeat the right words. They write the goals. They build the vision board, say the prayer, and try again. But the life keeps returning the same answer. Not because they are broken, not because they are unlucky, but because the wanting is not what the life is reading. Something else is being read. Something that doesn't live in thought at all, but in the way your chest tightens before certain conversations, the way your stomach drops before you check your account, the way something in you already knows how this is going to go before it has even started. That something is your belief, not the belief you say you have. The belief your body is already living. As you believe, so shall it be done. Before we go any further, I want to be honest with you about what that actually means. Because what it does not mean is that if you believe hard enough, want it intensely enough, or hold the vision long enough, life will eventually give in and hand you what you asked for. That reading has left a lot of sincere people exhausted, quietly ashamed, and wondering what they are doing wrong. What it means requires us to get very precise about one word. Not wish, not hope, not intend, believe. Because there are two kinds of belief, and they are not always living in the same place inside you. The first kind lives in your words. It shows up in the intentions you set, the things you write in your journal, the version of yourself you are consciously trying to become. It is real. It is not nothing. But it is the surface of the water, not the current underneath. The second kind lives in your body. It is older. It formed before you had language for it, before you had any way to question it or choose differently. It doesn't consult your morning routine. It doesn't care what you decided to believe today. It runs underneath your intentions like a channel cut deep into the ground, steady, invisible, and pulling everything in a direction you may not have consciously chosen. That second kind is your actual belief, and your life is not responding to what you say you believe. It is responding to that. Think of it like a camera lens with a tint already on it. You are pointing the camera at the world, choosing your subjects, adjusting your angle, working hard to capture something new. But the tint was installed years ago. Every photograph you take carries that color. You keep thinking the problem is the subject, or the lighting, or the composition. But the filter is already there before you press the button. The world is not producing the image. The lens is. Your internal belief is the lens, and most of what you call your reality is a photograph taken through it. Now, for many people who have already spent time with ideas like manifestation, subconscious reprogramming, or spiritual practice, this is not entirely new information. They can feel the gap. The desire is sincere, the intention is clear, the practice is consistent, and something still keeps returning the same answer. That something is the wall. Not a wall built by the world outside, not by bad luck or bad timing or forces beyond understanding. A wall built of something much closer, of what was decided quietly and automatically about what is possible for someone like you, about what love tends to do, about what money does when it gets close, about how things usually end. You cannot push through that wall with more effort. You cannot bring it down with louder declarations, because it is not made of thoughts. It was never made of thoughts. It is made of a deeper agreement, one your nervous system reached long before you were old enough to negotiate. Here is the clearest way I can put it. Most of us are trying to create a new life from the outside in. We try to arrange the circumstances, attract the right people, reach the right numbers, and when the outside doesn't change fast enough, we try harder. We visualize more clearly. We affirm more consistently. We do the work, but the work is being done at the wrong level. Because the wall is not between you and the life you want. The wall is between the belief you consciously hold and the belief your body is actually living. And until those two things begin to align, the effort on the surface will keep meeting a resistance it cannot see. And that resistance has a shape. It has a history. It was not placed there by accident, and it is not permanent. But understanding it, really understanding it, requires going somewhere almost no one wants to go. Not into technique, not into a new method or a better affirmation, into the place where the belief was first formed. Physics found something in the mid-20th century that it still hasn't fully explained. When scientists sent particles of light through two narrow openings, those particles didn't behave like objects. They spread out like ripples on water, interfered with each other, and produced a pattern on the wall behind that shouldn't have been possible for individual particles traveling alone. The mathematics described something stranger still. Before being measured, each particle didn't seem to occupy one definite position. It existed more like a field of open possibilities, a spread of maybes, until the moment of observation when it collapsed into a single specific path. And the detail that changed everything. The act of watching was part of what caused the collapse. That's the part worth sitting with. Before observation, many paths stayed open. The observation itself participated in which one became real. Here is where most people who know this story stop. They conclude, focus harder. Observe your desired outcome more intensely. Stare at your goal until it collapses into form. But that is not the deeper lesson. The question is not whether you are observing. You are always observing. Every moment of every day, some part of you is watching, reading, interpreting. The real question is, in what state the one who is observing exists? Because the inner condition of the observer, the quiet assumption underneath the looking, the emotional posture you are already in before anything happens. That is what shapes what gets noticed, what gets filtered out, and what gets drawn toward you. Two people can focus on the exact same goal with the exact same intensity, and one of them will see pathways while the other sees walls. Not because the world is different for each of them, because the observer is. Consider two people receiving the same unexpected compliment. Someone says sincerely, "I really believe in you." One person feels it land. Something in their chest opens. They receive it, let it settle, let it matter. The other smiles and immediately finds the exception. They don't really know me yet. They'll think differently once they do. The compliment dissolves before it can take root. Same words, same sincerity, same gift offered. Two completely different internal conditions receiving it. The first person didn't receive more because they were luckier or more spiritually advanced. They received more because their belief, deep, bodily, automatic, said, "This kind of thing can be real for me." The second person's belief said, "Wait for the correction." And neither of them chose those responses in the moment. The responses were already there, waiting, like reflexes that had been rehearsed for years without anyone calling them practice. And that is the part that changes the whole conversation. Think of a musician who has memorized a piece of music completely. They can describe every phrase, every tempo shift, every dynamic. Ask them anything about it and they'll answer without hesitation. The knowledge is real. But sit them at the piano after years away and watch what happens. The hands hesitate. They drift back into old muscle memory. The piece they know in the mind is not yet the piece the hands know. No amount of thinking about it closes that gap. The music has to move from the head into the fingers. Belief works exactly like this. You can carry a new belief in your mind, study it, repeat it, understand it completely, and still find your body living from the old one. Because the body has its own knowledge, its own practiced response, its own version of the music it has been playing for years. This is why two people can follow the exact same spiritual practice for the exact same amount of time and arrive at completely different places. One was practicing from a state of genuine inner shift, however small. The other was practicing over a body that hadn't moved underneath. The practice was identical. What differed was the soil it was planted in. And the soil, the inner condition, the state from which you move through your own life, was shaped long before today, long before you found these ideas, long before you decided you wanted something different. There is an idea that keeps appearing across very different traditions, dressed in different language but pointing at the same place. That the life you experience is not a neutral landscape you happen to be passing through. It is a responsive surface, one that tends to confirm, reinforce, and reshape itself around the assumptions you carry most deeply. A teacher from the last century put it in a phrase that has stayed with people for decades. The world is you pushed out. What he meant, stripped of all mysticism, is that what shows up in your life tends to match not who you wish you were, but who you have silently agreed to be. Not the identity you are building toward. The identity you are already living from. The one that feels true even when you wish it didn't. Think of your assumed identity as a container. It has a particular shape, formed by everything you have concluded about yourself over years of living. Now pour water into it. The water has no preference. It simply takes the shape of whatever holds it. Pour it into something round and it becomes round. Pour it into something narrow and it becomes narrow. Your life is the water. It doesn't arrive with a predetermined shape. It takes the shape of the container your identity provides, and the shape of that container was not determined by your goals, your desires, or your conscious intentions. It was shaped by what you deeply, automatically, and often silently believe yourself to be. Which raises the question that almost no one wants to stay with long enough to answer. Where did that belief come from? Because no one chose it deliberately. No child sat down one morning and decided, I will believe that I am not quite enough. I will believe that love always comes with a condition. I will believe that when things start to go well, something is probably about to go wrong. These conclusions were not made. They were formed. In a different way entirely. They were formed in moments when the body was small, the world was large, and the capacity for rational analysis had not yet arrived. A parent who was unpredictable taught the nervous system to stay braced, to read the room before entering, to treat alertness as a form of protection. A home where money was always the source of tension wrote a sentence on the inside of a child's chest long before that child had words for it. A teacher who corrected in front of others, a friendship that ended without explanation, a moment of rejection that was never repaired. Each of these left something behind, not a memory kept in the mind, a conclusion held in the body. A rule the nervous system encoded for navigating the particular world it found itself in. And the rules graduated, the child grew, the circumstances changed, the people involved became smaller with distance and time. But the rules came with you, not as stories you tell about yourself, but as reflexes you live from, instantaneous, automatic, arriving before you have had a chance to question them. The nervous system is like someone carrying a key cut for a lock that no longer exists. The lock, the original environment, the original threat, the situation that made the rule necessary, is long gone. But the key is still in the pocket, and in every new situation, the hand reaches for it. It tries it on every door. Sometimes, by coincidence, it fits. More often, it doesn't. But the hand keeps reaching, not because the key is right for this door, but because it is the one that was made for you, the one that once opened something important, the one the body trusts more than any new key you are consciously trying to cut. This is what the old observer does in an adult life. It applies the rules of a small world to a large one. It reads a partner's silence through the lens of a parent who went quiet before something difficult. It reads financial expansion through the memory of a home where having more always seemed to invite problems. It reads visibility, praise, or unexpected good news through the reflex of someone who once learned that being seen could be dangerous. The world did not teach you these responses yesterday, but the world keeps confirming them, because the observer who expects to find a thing tends to find it, and the one who keeps finding it keeps being met by more of the same. This is not a character flaw. It is not weakness or failure. It is the inevitable result of a system that was built to keep you safe in a world you no longer live in. The question, the one this entire video is quietly building toward, is not how to punish that old observer for what it has cost you. The question is, how to finally let it rest. Imagine someone who grew up in a house where money conversations happened in lowered voices, late at night after the children were supposed to be asleep. Not because things were catastrophic, just because there was always a tightness, always a calculation running underneath the surface of everything. The sound of bills being sorted on the kitchen table had a particular weight, and a child's nervous system, which is always listening even when no one thinks it is, filed that weight away as a fact about what money is. That person grows up, they study, they discover ideas about abundance, subconscious reprogramming, the relationship between mindset and money. They do the visualizations, they say the affirmations, they genuinely believe, on a conscious level, that they deserve more, and then something starts to work. The opportunities arrive, the number in the account begins to climb, and something in them starts to break. Not loudly, not with any announcement. They don't even notice it at first. They find themselves spending faster than they're saving, or making a decision that quietly undercuts the momentum, or taking on something that drains everything the last thing built. The mind is confused. The desire was real. The effort was real. But the body is doing what it learned to do in that kitchen years ago, keeping the level of resources near the familiar point, the point that feels like normal, the point the system was calibrated to before any of this began. Think of it like driving with the emergency brake partially engaged. Press the accelerator and the car moves. It makes real progress. But it never reaches its full speed, and there is always a drag you can feel but cannot quite locate. You check the engine, you adjust the fuel, you try different techniques. The problem was never the engine. The brake was never fully released. Scarcity belief does not always stop you completely. Sometimes it lets you go far enough to believe it is no longer there. And then, at a certain altitude, quietly, it starts to pull. Now, I want to speak directly to a specific person who may be watching this. You already know this material. You have known it for a while. You understand how the subconscious works. You can explain neuroplasticity. You know the vocabulary, nervous system, identity, belief, pattern, reprogramming. You have read the books, watched the videos, consumed years of content about transformation, attended the programs, taken the courses, and the life has not fully changed. This is the thing that almost no one says clearly. Knowledge is not transformation. Understanding the pattern does not dissolve it. You can map your inner world with extraordinary precision, every wound, every belief, every mechanism, and still be standing in exactly the same place you were when you started mapping. There is a particular identity that forms in people who have been on this path for a long time. The seeker. Always learning, always deepening, always moving towards something just over the next threshold. It is a genuine identity in many ways. Curious, committed, serious about growth. But there is a danger inside it that is rarely said out loud. Seeking can become its own protection against arriving. As long as you are seeking, you are not required to cross. You are not failing. You are simply not there yet. And not yet is a surprisingly comfortable address. It carries the sensation of motion without requiring the vulnerability of actually walking through. Think of someone who has memorized every road on a map, every route, every shortcut, every alternate path. The knowledge is real. The map is accurate. Ask them anything about the journey, and they can answer without hesitation. But they are still in the house. There is a difference between knowing the map and opening the front door, and the seeker, the one who has spent years becoming fluent in the language of change, sometimes finds, very quietly, that the map itself has become a reason to stay inside a little longer. Because outside the house, the map cannot help you. Outside the house, you have to feel the ground. Which brings everything in this video to a single question. If the belief lives in the body, not in the mind, not in the thought, not in the affirmation, if knowledge cannot reach it and repetition only touches the surface of it, then how do you actually change something you did not choose, did not consciously install, and cannot think your way out of? The answer is not a better technique. It is not a more precise visualization or a more committed practice. It begins somewhere that most people, especially the ones who have been seeking the longest, have been quietly, skillfully avoiding. The place you've been avoiding is not a dark place. It is not even a painful place exactly. It is simply a place where nothing is being fixed. For years, perhaps for as long as you have been on this path, you may have built a very efficient relationship with your own discomfort. The moment something difficult rises, something moves, you analyze it, you reframe it, you turn it into a lesson, a journal entry, a new insight about your patterns. And this is not wrong. Understanding matters. Awareness is real, but there is a quiet and important difference between understanding a feeling and actually feeling it. There are emotions stored in the body that were never completed. They arrived in childhood in a moment of loss, rejection, or humiliation, and the body, overwhelmed or simply too young, couldn't finish the experience, so it held it, built a layer of protection around it, kept moving. These held emotions don't dissolve on their own. They accumulate like sediment at the bottom of still water. When the water is calm, they are invisible. But when something in the present moment resembles the original situation, a tone of voice, a financial setback, a moment of being overlooked or dismissed, the sediment rises. The accumulated charge floods the present. A small comment about money doesn't land as a small comment. It lands with the weight of every money conversation you ever heard through a wall as a child. A moment of rejection doesn't feel like this rejection. It feels like all of them arriving at once. This is what makes certain reactions feel so disproportionate. What makes an ordinary Tuesday suddenly feel like the heaviest thing? The present is real, but it is being amplified by everything the body was never allowed to complete. And here is what doesn't help. Trying to manage that charge from above it, reframing it before you've felt it, converting it into insight before it has moved through you. The body is not looking for a better interpretation. It is not asking to be understood. It is asking for something much simpler. It is asking to be felt, not fixed, not immediately transformed into growth, not turned into your next breakthrough, just felt, completely, without the rush to make it mean something useful before it has even finished arriving. Think of a long corridor inside you, lined with doors. Most of them have been closed for years, not locked from the outside, but pulled shut by habit and protection and the perfectly reasonable decision to keep moving forward. In the dark, you cannot know what is behind them. You navigate by memory, by instinct, skirting the ones that once felt dangerous without even remembering why. Presence is not a tool for forcing those doors open. It is simply light in the corridor. When the light comes on, you can see. You can see which doors are still heavy with old charge, and which ones only felt that way from a distance. You can begin to move differently, not through effort, but through visibility. The pattern doesn't release because you fought it into submission. It begins to loosen because you can finally see it clearly enough to stop mistaking it for the floor. But here is where a very specific kind of person, and you may recognize yourself in this, makes a particular wrong turn. They hear that the observer shapes reality, that the inner state determines the outer experience. And something in them, something that has been working hard to get this right for a long time, takes that information and converts it into a new form of vigilance. They begin to monitor their thoughts, to check the quality of their feelings, to calculate whether their current state is aligned enough to attract what they want. Every difficult emotion becomes a threat. Every moment of sadness or frustration becomes evidence of doing it wrong, proof that they are setting back the work, generating the wrong signal, undoing what they were trying to build. This is the old fear-wearing spiritual language, and the painful irony is that this constant internal surveillance, the monitoring, the checking, the effort to maintain the right state through sheer control, is itself the old system running at full power. The same nervous system that once learned to brace for danger is now bracing for the danger of not being aligned enough. The same old observer scanning for threat, just scanning a different list. You cannot control your way into genuine belief. You cannot maintain your way into a new inner state. The very effort to sustain openness through vigilance keeps the nervous system in the one mode it most needs to leave. The mode that says the world is something to be carefully managed rather than something that can be trusted. The way through is not harder watching. It is something the survival system finds almost unbearable. It is letting go. Letting go does not begin with a decision. It begins with a recognition. The recognition that what you have been gripping, the vigilance, the monitoring, the careful management of your own inner state, was never really keeping you safe. It was keeping you familiar. And familiar, as we have seen, can feel exactly like safe even when it isn't. There is an image that captures what this moment feels like. Imagine you have been holding a rope for years, both hands full grip. You concluded, at some point, for reasons that once made complete sense, that without the rope you would fall into failure, into loss, into some version of yourself that couldn't be recovered from, so you held on. Your hands learned the texture of that rope so completely that the grip began to feel like part of who you are. Then, very slowly, you begin to open your hands. The first sensation is not relief, it is terror. Pure, physical, unmistakable, the kind that does not respond to reasoning. Your hands are open and there is nothing in them, and the body is certain that falling has already begun. But the fall doesn't come, because the ground was only inches below your feet the entire time. The rope was not holding you above anything. It was holding you in one position, hands occupied, unable to reach for anything new. What releases with the rope is not just the tension in your hands. What releases is the version of you that organized itself around the holding. And that is where the grief comes in. Because real transformation, not the kind that looks resolved in a caption, but the kind that actually changes the ground you stand on, involves genuine loss. You are not only gaining a new belief, you are releasing something that once kept you functioning in a world that felt unpredictable, something you built yourself around. Think of leaving a house you lived in for a long time. Not a perfect house, maybe not even one you loved, but a house that was yours, where you knew which floorboard creaked, where the afternoon light came in, where you could move in complete darkness without thinking. Leaving is still leaving, even when you chose to go. You still walk through the empty rooms before you close the door. You still feel something that doesn't quite have a name. The parts of you that are dissolving as you change deserve that kind of acknowledgement. The vigilant self that learned to read every room for danger. It was not a malfunction. It was intelligence, applied to the world that existed at the time. The part that learned to need less, to celebrate quietly in case joy drew attention to something that could be taken away, that was not weakness, it was protection. And protection, even when it is no longer needed, deserves to be recognized before it is released. This is where compassion becomes something more than a soft word. What you cannot accept in yourself, you cannot change. The part of you that says, "I should be past this by now," is not motivation, it is a lock. The pattern learns to hide from anything that feels like an attack. You do not dissolve a belief by condemning the part of you that holds it. You dissolve it by saying, honestly and without flinching, "Of course this is here. Of course it formed. Look at what it formed in response to. Of course it stayed. That sentence, of course, is quieter than any affirmation, and it reaches further than most techniques. If you have stayed with this video all the way to this point, you are not someone looking for an easy answer. You are willing to sit with the difficult thing, to let it be as complex as it actually is. That is not common, and it is exactly what this kind of change asks for. Staying this present with something difficult, instead of rushing past it, is already the work beginning. The recognition, though, is not the destination. At some point, the corridor has to be walked, and walking it looks different than the common story suggests. Not one grand breakthrough, but a 5-second window that opens somewhere in the middle of an ordinary day, waiting to see if you notice it before it closes. Here is what the practice actually looks like, not in theory. On an ordinary morning, in a room you know, before the day has made any demands yet. The alarm has not sounded, but you are already awake. There is a moment, brief, easy to miss, fragile in the way that only the most important things are, before the mind has fully loaded, before the list of what needs doing arrives, before the worried thought about the conversation you haven't had yet, before the familiar weight of yesterday settles back in and makes itself at home. The old program hasn't engaged. The previous day's emotional residue hasn't fully ported over into this one. That moment is the most undervalued real estate in your entire day. Not because of what you do in it, but because of what hasn't happened yet. The observer has not received its morning assignment. The channel has not been confirmed. You are, for a few seconds, genuinely available in a way you almost never are once the day begins to move. Before the feet touch the floor, before the phone is reached for, there is room to ask something, not with intensity or performance, but very quietly. What is already here that is supporting me? Not something you have to invent or pretend. Something the body can actually register as real. The warmth still in the blanket, the breath still moving on its own. The fact that something in you woke up and chose to start again. These are not poetic gestures. They are signals, small ones, but they reach the nervous system in a way that the most beautifully worded affirmation often cannot, because they are true and the body knows the difference. This is not about manufacturing positivity before the coffee. It is about choosing, in the quietest way possible, what the first calibration of the day will be. Because the nervous system uses the first reading of the morning to set a kind of baseline tone, and everything that arrives afterward gets filtered through that tone without your permission. The reason this matters so deeply has to do with how the brain is actually built. Thoughts and emotions that are activated together repeatedly form connections that strengthen over time. The pathway between them becomes more efficient with use. The way a river, given the same direction for long enough, eventually cuts a permanent channel into the earth. At a certain point, the water stops choosing the channel. The channel chooses the water. The current goes there because that is where the ground has opened. This is what the old reactive pattern is. A channel that has been receiving the same water for years. You don't decide to tighten when money feels scarce. You don't decide to shrink when someone's tone shifts. The water simply flows where the opening is deepest. It has been doing this for so long that the flow itself feels like instinct. But channels that stop receiving water begin, slowly, to silt up. The walls come in, the depth decreases. New channels, given consistent and deliberate flow, begin to open. Every time you notice the old pattern and do not fully follow it, the old channel receives fractionally less. Every time you choose a different response, imperfect, uncertain, barely formed, the new pathway receives fractionally more. The change is not dramatic. It does not announce itself, but it accumulates the way all real change does, in a direction you cannot always see while you are inside it. Now, the morning is only one laboratory. The more demanding one is the rest of the day. An email arrives from someone whose approval has mattered too much for too long. Something contracts in the chest immediately. A tightening, a pulling inward. The first syllables of a story about what this means and what it says about your standing, your competence, your right to be where you are. The old channel is ready. It has carried this water before. It knows the route. And here, inside approximately 5 seconds, something else becomes available. Not a reframe, not a spiritual interpretation, not a decision about what the email really means in the larger arc of your growth. Simply a pause, long enough to feel the physical sensation, the tightening, the heat, the held breath, without immediately building the narrative that turns it into identity. Can you stay with the raw experience for 5 seconds before the story begins? Can the sensation exist without instantly becoming proof of something about who you are? Those 5 seconds are not a small thing. They are precisely the location where the old observer and the new one exist simultaneously, where the channel that has always taken the water and the one that is learning to receive it are both present, both available, both real. You will not always make it. Some days the old channel takes you before the pause has a chance to open. That is not failure. That is the honest cost of working with a system that has been flowing one way for a very long time. But some mornings, the window will stay open a little longer. Some emails will not pull you all the way in. Some moments will carry a faint, quiet sense of space that was not there before. And that space, small as it is the new channel receiving its first careful trickle of water. There comes a point somewhere in this process where the practice stops feeling like a practice and starts feeling like permission. Permission to feel what arrives without immediately directing it somewhere useful, without converting it into a lesson in the first 3 seconds, without deciding, before the sensation has even finished arriving, what this emotion is supposed to mean about your progress or your worthiness or how far you still have to go. Just the raw fact of it, the tightening, the heat, the sudden weight, moving through a body that has finally learned to stop fighting its own weather. An emotion that is fully felt follows the physics of completion. Think of a tuning fork that has been struck. It vibrates at its natural frequency, rings through its full resonance, and then goes quiet. Not because something stopped it, because it was allowed to finish. Hold it mid-vibration, close your fist around it before it's done, and the energy doesn't disappear. It transfers into your hand, into your arm, into the tension you carry for days without knowing where it came from. But let it ring completely, and it simply finishes. The sound ends because the sound was given room to end. Emotions that have been held in the body for years are tuning forks that were caught mid-ring. The grief that was too large for the room it arrived in. The fear that had nowhere safe to go. The anger that was too dangerous to show in the family that shaped you. When these finally find space to complete, not to be analyzed or immediately transformed into something productive, but simply to ring out fully, Something that has been braced for a very long time begins to soften. The usual expectation is a breakthrough, a visible clearing, a moment you can point to. It rarely works that way. One day you notice that something arrived, a setback, a sharp word, a reminder of the old wound, and it moved through you differently. Not because you managed it better or talked yourself through it more skillfully. The charge that used to accompany it simply wasn't there in the same proportion. You moved through the morning. You had other thoughts. Something, somewhere, completed itself without making an announcement. This is the transformation that is difficult to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. There is no moment to show, no clear before and after. Just a gradual, almost imperceptible shift in the way the world lands. The low background noise of anticipating what might go wrong, lower now. Not silent, but no longer the loudest thing in the room. Space has appeared where there was only pressure before. And in that space, something you could not have manufactured through effort becomes possible. Actual rest, actual presence, a morning that is just a morning rather than another field to scan for danger. If some part of you is already feeling that space open, even a little, that's worth marking. Subscribe and follow this channel because this kind of shift doesn't finish in one video. It deepens every time you come back to it. And there's more waiting, right where this leaves off. And then, quietly, something else begins to happen. Not as reward, as a natural consequence of a filter that has genuinely changed. Things that were always available begin to become visible. The conversation that contains an opening your old observer would have walked past. The offer your previous self would have dismissed before it was finished being made. The person whose steadiness you couldn't feel before because your system was reading everything through the lens of what had hurt you. Think of adjusting the focus on a pair of binoculars that have been slightly off for years. The landscape was always real, just blurred enough that you couldn't trust what you were seeing. When the focus shifts, the world suddenly has detail it only seemed to lack before. What becomes available is not a different world. It is a different receiver. And this is what the title of this video is actually pointing toward. Not a formula for extracting outcomes from reality. Not a technique for making life comply with desire. As you believe, not as you wish, not as you intend, not as you declare in your best moments. So shall it be done. Belief is not a sentence, it is a state. It is the water you have been swimming in so completely that it stopped feeling like water and started feeling like simply the way things are. The deepest form of this work is not learning to believe more intensely. It is learning to become whole enough that you stop trying to receive from outside what you have not yet allowed yourself to feel within. Not because wholeness is a condition that must be met before life will move, but because the one who no longer needs proof to feel real, quietly, imperfectly, without waiting for the world to confirm it, is the one who can finally see what was always there and reach for it without the old hand pulling back. At the very beginning of this video, before anything had been said, I told you that your body had already decided something. Not about the video, about you. That was not a dramatic opening. That was the whole point. Because everything we have walked through together, the filter that decides what is real before you are conscious of it, the belief that lives in the body and not in the thought, the old program running silently beneath all the intentions, the grief of beginning to release it, the compassion that finally allows something to move. All of it was pointing at that one quiet fact. Something inside you is always deciding, always reading, always collapsing the field of open possibilities into the particular life you then experience as simply how things are. The work is not to control that deciding. You have seen what the survival system does when it gets spiritual language and converts awareness into surveillance. The work is not to override it with a better sentence. You have seen how far knowledge alone fails to reach. The work, the real, slow, unglamorous, quietly revolutionary work, is to become someone whose body has learned a different story to tell itself. Not a perfect story, not an invincible one, not one that never feels the pull of the old patterns, but one where those patterns, when they arrive, are no longer automatically mistaken for the truth about who you are or what remains possible for you. One where the old program loads and something in you watches it load and does not simply obey everything it says. That something is the new observer, and it is not built in a single moment of understanding. It is built in accumulation. The morning that was met with something other than dread. The email that was felt without immediately becoming a story about your worth. The old pattern that was named with "of course" instead of shame. The rope that was held a little more loosely than the day before. You will not always notice the building while it is happening. The river does not feel itself cutting the new channel. But the direction is real, and the accumulation is real, and one day, in an ordinary moment with no particular significance, you will notice that something has shifted. Not everything, not dramatically, but enough that the life you are living feels, however quietly, like it belongs to someone freer than the one who first pressed play. If any part of this has mattered to you, I want to ask something directly. Follow this channel and come back, not because one video changes the observer, but because returning to these ideas in different seasons of your life is part of how the new channel receives its water. Share this with 5 people who you sense are ready for this kind of conversation. Not to convince them of anything, but because sometimes the most generous thing you can do is hand someone a mirror at the right moment and leave a comment that is actually true for you right now. Not a performance of growth, but whatever is real, what landed, what you are still sitting with, what you want us to walk through together next. This is a continuing conversation, and where it goes from here matters. Now, there is a space that opens between sleeping and waking. A few seconds, sometimes less, where you have not yet remembered who you were yesterday. The old program has not loaded. The identity has not assembled itself. The list of what is uncertain and what still hasn't arrived has not begun. In that space, you are only present, only the breath. Only the quiet weight of a body in a room, not yet assigned to any story. That is the closest almost anyone ever comes to the new observer. That is the state the whole practice is quietly pointing toward, not as something you achieve once and maintain, but as something the body learns to return to, a little faster, a little more often, with a little less resistance each time. Tomorrow morning, that space will open again, the brief moment before the day decides who you are, and in that moment, before anything has been chosen for you, you get to choose. As you believe, in that breath, so shall it be done.